Chair, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is the meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor Bridges and I am Chairman of this meeting. A key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those in the public gallery, you will not be on camera. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn the microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. Some quick housekeeping rules before we go on to our main agenda. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if one sounds, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre forecourt. Mobile devices to be placed off or switched on silent. Resident feedback forms are also available at the back of the room or underneath the broadcast. We now move on to the main agenda item. Apologies for absence, please.
Yes, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Scott Farley and we have Councillor Punja substituting for him.
Thank you very much and a warm welcome again to Councillor Punja, and may also take the opportunity to welcome our new members, Councillor Kaur and Councillor Davis, to this committee. Declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Are there any? I can see no indications. We move on to the minutes of the previous meetings dated 16th of April and 9th of May, pages 1 to 10. Are there any comments or can we agree them? Agreed. Thank you very much. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in part 1. There are no part 2 items to be considered. Moving on to item 5, which is the review of the homelessness and customer journey, our witness session 3, pages 11 to 22. I'm delighted to welcome all of our witnesses this evening. We have, just reading off the list, we have Hamid Khan, Zara Sweets from P3 Useley, Laura Lawson, P3 Useley, Nicola Talon from P3 Useley, and Sophie Murray, lead manager of the Hillingdon Thames Reach Outreach Team, we're also joined by Dan Kennedy, who will be introducing tonight's report, followed by comments and presentations from our witnesses. Dan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and very much welcome to our colleagues who support us in our endeavour to tackle homelessness. So this is another witness session, and we're inviting colleagues from P3, from Thames Reach to really sort of walk us through their experience and their perspective, their lens really, in working with us, but also I suppose the lens of the residents who do find themselves in a homelessness situation. So really, without further ado, probably hand over first to Sophie.
Hello, is that on?
Sorry, could you place the microphone button on before you speak? Is it on? Oh, the light's just not working at the top. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Sorry about that. Thank you for inviting me here today. So yes, I'm the new lead manager for the Hillingdon Thames Reach Outreach Team. We work very closely with the Rough Sleeper team within the Hillingdon Council. So you have your prevention pathway, you also have your Rough Sleeper pathway, which is led by Wesley Carter, the Rough Sleeper coordinator. So we work very closely alongside the housing officers that work within the Rough Sleeper pathway, and then we provide their outreach service. We are the first contact if you do a street link for a Rough Sleeper in the area. We are the team that will go out and respond to that street link. We have a rapid response team that go out every night of the year, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. and they respond to those street links overnight. We are also the day team that work from then 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. To respond for any street links that perhaps are in woodland areas or respond to the newfound people by the rapid response team. We also conduct a street count once a month, in addition to the whole council street count that is conducted in November, to regularly keep an eye on the stats and the count of the rough sleepers in the area. Day to day, we work on casework with those rough sleepers that are found. Once they are verified as rough sleeping, once they are found bedded down, that's when they become verified. That's something decided by the GLA, that we have to work with verified rough sleepers. We work to support them. We have, at the moment, we should have 7 members of our team. We're actually at 4 at the moment. We are recruiting. We work with those day-to-day just casework. We assess them. We refer them to agencies such as RAMP and Mental Health, Rough Sleep and Mental Health Team, ARCH for substance misuse. We also identify their local connection, perhaps support them to reconnect to boroughs that, if their local connection is with other boroughs. We do duty to refers, we support them with their pathway into housing, and obviously, most importantly, into Hillingdon. So that's just a bit of an overview. We work with a lot of complex rough sleepers. A lot of the rough sleepers that we end up seeing is they end up rough sleeping because of their complex needs and their support needs, and that's why we work quite closely with ARCH and RAMP. Within regards to the pathway in Hillingdon, because we do work within the council and we work so closely with the rough sleeper team, we have quite a good pathway to get our rough sleepers accommodated. It's most tricky at the moment just because there is just no options. That is the main issue currently. We have one hostel, which is Olympic House. I'm sure you all know. I know that you had Trinity before. That is the only hostel that we have, only supported pathway that we have for our rough sleepers. And when people do become rough sleeping, it's mostly because they have complex needs and they haven't been able to support themselves through general needs. So to have only one hostel of 30 bed spaces for the amount of rough sleepers that we see perhaps isn't enough, and that only one supported pathway is what we're struggling with at the moment. They deal with like low to medium support needs, but we have a lot of high support needs people that basically become gridlocked because there's no high supported pathway within the council. The other thing that we struggle with is that a lot of our rough sleepers at the moment perhaps have already had an application with the council previously, and actually at the prevention stage they've maybe struggled to be supported, and that's when they turn into rough sleeping and they're told then to do a street link so that we can come out and support them and provide the translators and provide the referrals to support services and help them with their all paperwork and refer them to places like P3 to be able to support them so that they get the right support. So yeah, open to questions.
Thank you. What I will do, actually, I will go to the next presentation. We'll take questions at the end in case there's any cross questions for both parties. So if we start now with P3. If you can just use your microphone button.
Okay, so P3 is based in Youthly, Navigator, of which is just off of Fairfield Road. So from there we do it's a family hub and young people. So we actually work with, we've got 4 services running from the Navigator Centre, of which we have our housing advice service, which Nicola, my colleague, she heads up. So we've got 2 staff on that, and that's from a prevention side. With regards to housing, we have our floating support service as well, which is for 16 to 25-year-olds. That's for looked after children and care experienced. We have our wellbeing project, which is early intervention prevention for young people, 13 to 25 as well. And then we have also our move on properties. We have 2 free beds for low support as well. And we also deliver our family advice service, which is working for any family with a child aged 5 and under that reside within Hillingdon. So we deliver that from the children's centres as well as the Navigator hub as well. We have, as well as the housing advice project that we're currently running at the moment this year, we have also previously worked alongside and within the council. So we actually had statutory duty. So we've been, and Nicola, our colleague, actually worked for P3, moved over to the council, worked at the council for a period and has actually come back to P3. Similar to Sophie, with the advice as well that we provide, it is supporting young people and families around mental health benefits, financial, education, employment and training. We also support and we work closely with many partners within the borough, such as IDFA around domestic abuse, the Women's Centre, Southwark Black Sisters. Housing-wise, again, we work with Thames Reach, Trinity, YMCA. I'm sure Nicola will be able to advise of more. And we also have, as well as that then, Laura heads up our accommodation services that we provide supported accommodation for young, looked after children and care experienced children as well in the borough. So that's sort of P3 in a nutshell. So yeah.
I'll just go ahead, following on from Zara saying of the supported accommodation. We've got the 4 supported units where we support 16 to 25-year-olds with who have previously been in care or looked after care. And again, touching on excuse me, what Sophie said, it is a case of the struggles is move on and opening up doors to moving young people on to appropriate accommodation, finding those networks that actually they can be moved on from, because we're finding between all of the services that there's a blockage, and all of the services are sort of not able to move on because of finding that appropriate accommodation to move the young people onto.
Yeah, and then following on from what everyone has said so far, supported accommodation, everyone is kind of stuck where they are right now. Rents are really expensive. The council are finding it hard to find accommodations that will accept people that are homeless. So we're all kind of just stuck at the moment with what we have and what we can do.
Okay, thank you very much. I now invite questions from members, and we'll start with Councillor Gardner, please.
So, arthritis. This is a question for both of you, actually. What does the housing department need to do, I'm talking about the actual housing department, to improve the experience of both yourselves and the client group that you deal with? It's a heavy-duty question, but we'd like to know. Thanks.
I would say communication is key, and I would say communication internally, externally, making sure that everyone is on the same page, keeping everyone in the loop. A lot of changes happen within the housing department constantly, that us as, partnership workers don't always hear about. And then, just keeping residents in the loop as well. So improving on that however they can. I know it's difficult with caseloads being high, but I think it's doable.
I think it's that platform for communication. I think it's key. We've attended quite a few meetings outside and things like that, and having an actual platform where everybody can come together and communicate is vital. And there's so many services within the borough which housing are linked into, but it's like everyone keeps them to themselves. And social services have got housing properties, the council's got housing properties, but they're all each other's. Everyone's got their money settled in each investment, and so it really limits, again, what Sophie was saying, back to only having Olympic House. It is like everyone's got their own pocket, but there's no universal approach on anybody having access to what is really valuable in the borough.
Sophie, so do you want to say something?
Okay. So just to emphasise again what they both said, is that the communication. I think I would really praise the communication that we have with our sleeper pathway, but one of the main issues that we are having at the moment is that a lot of our people that we work with that do turn to rough sleeping because they have had applications previously with the prevention team, and that the communication has failed for whatever reason. They don't even know where their case is at. It's probably gone past the 56 days in a lot of cases, and housing officers have closed the case without either alerting them, or they've not finished the assessment properly, and then they become rough sleeping, and then they approach the council. And I know that the housing services closed its doors slightly, and then they just get told to do a street link, and then we pick them up. And it's not easy for us to then pick that case up, because we depend on our accommodation options via what the council provide. And if that housing application is closed, and we can't do anything, whereas if that communication was there in the first place with the clients, then they would perhaps know where they stood. I think when people approach the civic centre, it's very difficult, I do understand, because like I said, the caseloads are high, and you can't have everyone coming to the civic centre to get an update on their case. But we do find that even when we contact prevention homelessness officers, they don't even respond to us. and we work in the same office most of the time. And that is a real barrier. I think, you know, we're all here to work together. We're all here to fight the same cause. There's no point, you know, shooing us away. I think, yeah, that is one of the main things I would say. I think a lot of the numbers that we're seeing at the moment, particularly, I know this has been touched on, but there's a lot of the Home Office evictions, and that does present with a whole load of support needs in itself. You know, you have a lot of language barriers, you have a lot of people with trauma and PTSD that don't necessarily meet mental health thresholds or priority needs thresholds, that are just told they're no priority need, and when you've claimed asylum from another country, what does that mean to you? You know, you're just told that you're not a priority. I think there needs to be more time and more patience and spent with these people to make them truly understand what that means, because otherwise all that happens is the housing officer tells them to do a street link and they come to us and we have to spend the time explaining that to them. And don't get me wrong, that's what I'm here to do, that's why I do the job I do, but I think that a lot of the rough sleeping could be reduced or at least prevented slightly differently, hopefully. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Garden. Sorry.
So I was going to say, just following on from Sophie, with regards to, obviously, as well as the communication, it is having that consistency as well for, I'll say, the young people or the families, whoever that you're working with that is approaching the council, because I think even, again, the turnover of staff, as well, if they're having different caseworkers, the caseloads are extremely high. From when I managed our advice service within and having a statutory duty, that was one of the things that we said, coming from our P3 charity side, where our floating support and other services, maximum for the complex needs and what is needed, 25 people on a caseload. We were working with the council and we were hitting up to 70. How, when you've got complex needs and you are trying to stay on top of things, this is where the staff are then burning out and not having that time out to be able to do holistic work with the young people, the families. And there was again, then going back to the communication, even when I was present in there, I would then come into the office and be told, oh no, that person isn't working here anymore, or that person's now moved on, oh, this is a new procedure that we're now doing. So me as a manager of a service that you're funding, you're not even communicating with myself and my team for us to be able to deliver a service as well. So that's, for me, what is happening to the public coming in as well. So where's their voice? And when we are trying to work holistically and more from a prevention angle, you just haven't got time. You haven't got that time to be working with them, to do them weekly phone calls. Have you found anywhere? Have you done this? Because it's another referrals come in. I've got to catch up on the caseload. The admin side and the database system is, well, I think chalk and slate would be better. To be honest with you, it was horrendous, and you're losing that time and that working with the individual as a person, as opposed to a tick box exercise. Oh, sorry, oh, you don't meet this, I'm not answering to you, and that. So yeah, it's there's many suggestions. We have put that previously, had put that forward, given our ideas as to how to make the whole situation be better in the delivery from a client's perspective, as well as even individually as staff members as well of the council and of the housing officers as well. But, yeah.
Councillor Gardner, do you wish to have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you for being so honest. Basically, you're saying that, I mean, there's a silo culture in this council where all the different departments are incapable of speaking to each other, and that's why we're here doing what we're doing, to try and get things worked out. Thank you.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Two points really. First of all, around families with under fives and the challenges that presents, and how you balance the building of trust with their parents and the people that are potentially at risk of being homeless or may be homeless, against the needs of the young person, and making sure that they're getting that, and how you balance. That's a really difficult balancing act, I expect. I'm just interested to see how you do that. But also around those that you're putting into the houses, where they're living independently, how you work with local residents to alleviate their fears. Unfortunately, people are going to get a perception that if a house has lots of people coming in out of it, that is going to raise concerns for residents. Whether that's right or wrong, or those conceptions are right or fair, is for another time to discuss in another place. But obviously that is what we get feedback, or feedback I get from people of those concerns. How do you work with local residents and with the people going in to make sure that they can be good neighbours, and to alleviate the fear that, because most of those people are good people just trying to turn their lives around, they're not going to cause loads of trouble, they're not going to be difficult, and how you work with those, just to start there. Thank you.
So with regards to that, we've always found, or with our move-on properties, they're small properties, so both of them are 3-bedroom. So it's manageable. We do, anyone that we do move into those properties, obviously we do interview them and have like a needs assessment with them first, to ensure that, because they are low support, that they are appropriate for moving in. We have our floating support team go minimum once a week to go and see them as well, working with them to get into, if they're not already, into education, employment or training as well, so that a lot of the time they're not hanging about at home, so to speak. By being able as well, where we are like seen as landlords, we do speak like with residents. They are aware of where our office is, like our centre. So if there are any issues, again, they can phone, email, pop in, see us and let us know. And yeah, it's just building that trust, showing our face, and yeah, being open and honest with the residents, I think, for that one. Yeah, and then with regards to the families, it is more, we don't personally provide accommodation for those. That is more, it's the advice and guidance and support in making applications, following up with housing, are they bidding, and are they on the correct banding for that locator application. So that is more advice and guidance as opposed to housing. So, yeah.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Smallwood?
Yeah, more around people who necessarily. How do you tap into the people that don't necessarily want the help? There is a small number of people who are homeless that actually it's a real struggle to get them to accept the help. They obviously maybe have a distrust of the social services, of the housing people, of the police. You know, society may have let them down. How do you do work across any of your services to truly try and tap into those people that the one in Ruislip, right? He ended up having to go to hospital. It was incredibly tragic, but he really didn't want to go because that was his way of life, right? And I just wondered how you try and break that barrier of those people that have almost given up on being anything other than homeless, and trying to bridge that very difficult gap, not with everybody, but with some that doesn't think. I can see you nodding, so I'll let you go.
So I was going to say this one probably more for Sophie and her team, because they deal with like entrenched rough sleepers. I think when you're coming to P3, you're asking for help. So in a sense, our job is easier in that way. But yes, unfortunately we have a lot of people that don't want to accept the help, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, a lot of endurance, a lot of building up trust. There's no other way to explain it apart from our team that go out in the morning, in the evening, whatever time suits them, sitting down with them, literally laying down with them, going to where their safe space is, and listening to what they want, because sometimes it's not a question of bombarding them with everything all at once. It's taking it step by step, as listening to what they feel that they need in the first instance, and a lot of the time it can be nothing, and they just, say rude words and ask you to go away. But then we go back and we say, look, are you sure this is the route that you want to take, and things like that. A lot of the time, unfortunately, it is due to complex needs, and that's when you have to bring in other services, and that's when we work with our mental health team, and it can sometimes lead to a mental health act assessment. So we work with our substance misuse team, and we go out on joint outreach visits, and we tackle that as an option, make sure that they build up the trust with that team. For example, they know who they might be seeing when they go to the service. If if they're too anxious or to go into the service itself, sometimes we do it on the street. We sit down with them in their safe space. We bring the services to them. In terms of a lot of the time it could be to do with immigration. We have a lot of immigration cases where they don't want to engage with services because they're afraid of what might happen immigration-wise. We explain as much as we can that it's not in our jurisdiction to make any decision on that case, but we can provide you advice. We have law centres that we can refer to and that they can provide the accurate information. But yeah, in terms of complex cases, it's just patience. And we have a lot of empathy between us and the team, different skill sets. And we have a lot of cases where we do get successes, even if it is 18 months down the line. It's just building up that trust and taking it step by step and tackling one thing at a time. And we do have, within Thames Reach and within the GLA, we also do have our entrenched cohort. That's probably separate to Hillingdon. That's not just Hillingdon. We do have further things that we can refer to, further support, further navigators that come with different charities, and we link with other charities like St Mungo's that can provide support to more entrenched rough sleepers and advice. Yeah.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. My question is quite similar to Councillor Gardner's actually, and it's about the way Thames Reach and P3, and I did have HD, AAS, but they're not here as well. But how all of you communicate, coordinate with each other, and with the council to provide a seamless service, and if there's any, and through your work together, if you've identified any gaps in service delivery apart from communication that's I think's already been mentioned. Yeah.
I would say for us at P3, our communication with Thames Reach, Trinity, YMCA, all the other like charity organisations in Hillingdon is spot on. Sometimes we have someone walk in homeless on the day. I can ring the manager at YMCA and say, have you got a room? She will say yes, send them down. I will house them within a couple of hours. They haven't even had to come to the council. If it is a case where I can't do that, I could wait a week to get a response from the council. Yeah, we have a great communication, great relationship with our external, our joint partners, things like that. Like, you know, as I can contact Nicola for an advice with our 18 to 25-year-olds, we're seeing a lot of them at the moment. I will give her a call or an email and she'll respond to me and provide some support, even if it's, we can't personally do things like YMCA referrals, so we know that we can refer to these guys and that they can support, and it helps also with the people that you're supporting, that they know they feel supported because they know that, you know, we get on and we know that we're handing over to a good team as well. And Trinity, likewise, you know, we have Olympic House, we go to Olympic House most days ourselves, checking the clients that we've put in and the seamless approach, and they will let us know if they've got any voids coming available so we can do a seamless transition. And it does make it a lot easier when there is those options, because like Nicola said, we can just go straight through that pathway. But when things do start to block up and you have to take the council route, that's when things perhaps take a bit longer.
Your supplementary, Councillor, go ahead.
Yes, please. And just for my knowledge, roughly how many, roughly as like a percentage, do you know how many you can just refer yourselves, and how many go through to the council? Is it like a 60-40 split or like something like that? Just curious.
So I'd say, I can't really give you a statistic, but all of our people that we work with that have a Hillingdon connection, we do have to go through the council pathway, because things like Olympic House, they're still not a move on, they're not a permanent solution. So they do still have to go through the council pathway. So in that sense, 100%, apart from the people that have local connections to other boroughs, because Olympic House is still a TA option. I don't know if that answers your question, but... I would say in the last couple of months we've noticed a massive decline in NAS evictions, which is the Home Office accommodations ending. I'm guessing it's just maybe a slow period, or maybe it's the over 25s and it hasn't hit us. But recently, where we've had a few more gaps able to fill in the accommodations, such as YMCA or Trinity, I personally haven't referred anyone to the council in over a month.
Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for everything you do for the borough, because it's quite challenging times at the moment, as we can hear. I just wanted to paraphrase something before, that leads me on to my question, really. So, in terms of the gaps that both Councillor Gardner and Councillor Gohill asked about, when we're looking at something like communications, and we're kind of sitting there going that maybe having some kind of format of regular communications would keep people out of homelessness, because there could be a prevention probability, is what I'm trying to understand from what you are saying, and you're all nodding your heads. Therefore, how much are you guys still in the pathway, in that communication trail, after you've kind of said, okay, well, I've got to reach out to the council now? So how much are then you kept on that journey at the end? Because
we stay right through, so from start of journey till end, especially if they're more like complex cases, if they have higher support needs. We'll still keep them open and just keep checking in monthly. A lot of people, like what Sophie said as well, sometimes people aren't, linked up with mental health services, GPs, so we'll look at that after getting them housed as well, and just make sure they've got everything in place so that they can try and sustain it, basically.
Yeah, I think I'm just touching on that it is then, once the referral has been made, obviously we do our best in order of looking at like the early intervention prevention. Part of that we do outreach, like schools, community settings as well. But then once, if it does, then a referral is made to the council, and we are then assisting, and if they are then housed, we then assist as well, like with maintaining their tenancy as well, because sometimes a young person especially can be housed, okay, here's your keys, in you go. Okay, what about like my TV licence, my bills, how do I do this, like furnishings, things like, and Nicola and her other colleague Danielle, they will then assist the young person, okay, are there any grants that we're able to access, again, like support around mental health, do you need like the community mental health team involved, whatever specialist services are then needed, they will then assist, and it will be that continuation until we feel that they are ready, like to be their case closed, so to speak.
And we've got a wellbeing project within P3 as well, which is early intervention on mental health, so we tap into that whilst trying to help people get into NHS, like talking therapies.
Sophie, did you?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. We kind of see, obviously, we're working with rough sleepers, so they're kind of at the, unfortunately, like, the lowest point. They've had to become rough sleeping. So we support with every step of the way. We support them with the application, contacting the housing officers. A lot of the time the issue is that they struggle with communication, things like that. So yeah, we're there every step of the way. And then we don't have a floating support service, but Trinity have a floating support service. And also there is a Dipple West London floating support service that we can refer to. And then things like P3 or RAMP or ARCH, they're support services that stay with them even through accommodation. So when our people go into Olympic House, we do still support them because we have that relationship with Trinity. We still go to Olympic House. But even if they're in private rented with some floating support, places, agencies like RAMP and ARCH will still be their key workers, and we'll still have a bit of knowledge about their case. But going for, yeah, so as much as we can, we stay with them as long as we can.
Councillor Punja, do you have an additional question?
Thank you. So what you're saying is basically it's the wraparound care that tags onto the housing department that you keep onto with various cases. In that case, what kind of support can be created that kind of alleviates pressure from the council, who have got pressure coming in from all over the place as well, in terms of evictions and homelessness, and then people on banding systems, and also then how you said you had to wait a week before you get a response, but then when you've got all the letters coming through and things like that, what's that communication like? Because there's we deal with cases all the time where we've got lots of P3 letters coming through for our residents, but when that goes into the system and it's in banding, it feels like it's stuck somewhere. And how much how much of those letters of value to the housing department do you feel? Because is it like you're batting your head against a brick wall, or is it actually, right, okay, that relationship is really working, they really believe in the statements that we're making to be able to put these in the right categories? Or
I think before, when we were more based at the Civic Centre, so we were here for probably like 2 years, and I was the service coordinator whilst we were here. The communication was a lot better because obviously I was on site, so I could just walk up to desks and ask questions. Knowledge was shared better. We had a lot more say in the decisions that we made. If we thought that someone was in priority need and needed temporary accommodation, I was allowed to make that decision. That all changed and went back to, it was the head of department that needed to make that decision. I would say since then, officers haven't been able to make decisions without having to contact head of department and run it by them. I understand not everyone can be given temporary accommodation, and it has to be a strict, criteria to assess it. However, I think a lot of the time, not everyone is on the same page. So, yeah, I might now say, I think this person is very vulnerable because of ABC, and that person maybe 2 years ago, when I was here, would have been assisted or assessed differently and given a different decision. However, legislation allows for a different decision to be made, and sometimes in the eyes of the law, a person might not be classed as vulnerable. So it depends when you're coming in with a P3 perspective or a council perspective. But yeah, there's no concrete, definitive answer for that question, because it depends on case by case and who you get to talk to.
That goes back to the
Could you use your microphone, please?
That goes back as well to the not being consistent. So again, there might be when we feel that someone is in need or needs that help, you can go to person A. Yep, brilliant. They need this, this, and this. They'll have the service. You could go to person B. No, shut the door. And we're not, and that can be, and I understand with regards, especially maybe seen as more non-priority needs, but this is also, we have had cases that have actually are priority need, and we've had to come up ourselves with, even after phoning the council and housing options, advising this is the need of the young person, they will, but yep, send them up. So they've come, they've got to the front door, no, you're not being seen, for my colleagues to then have to actually come back up with the young people and say, I've just spoken to person A, they've told us, and to then be seen and have the service that they are actually entitled to. And it's hard because we're trying to advocate, and we are doing that, because otherwise that's then when you do start getting the solicitors and laws involved, and it's not exactly cost effective. Just if you haven't got that consistent approach, then you are going to get more issues.
Thank you. I'll go to the next question. You can have a chance at the end. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I just want to go back to communication. So it's a big thing for all of us, communication. How much insight do you get into the council systems? So do you have a linked system that if you had a rough sleeper that you dealt with, do you put that on a central system somewhere that you guys can see and that the council can see, or does it just float on your system and not move until someone else picks them up 6 months down the line, etc.?
So we work for a charity called Thames Reach, so we have our own databases. In the rough sleeper database, we have a database called Chain, where we verify all our rough sleepers, and all our information, our casework goes onto that. We don't have any access to any Hillingdon systems, but because we work closely with the rough sleeper team within Hillingdon, we can always go to the coordinator, and he will, when we do our pathway and we do our applications, they go directly to him, and they pick the case up and they accept the application. It only tends to be when we pick people up off the street and they've already got open housing applications, then we have to communicate with the prevention team. Otherwise, when we pick people up straight away and they haven't got any case at all, we go directly to the Russleaf team, and then they put them on their database, but we don't have any links to the Hillingdon database at all. We always have to go through them.
And yeah, that's the same with P3 now, that there's no access to the Hillingdon database. When we had the contract, we were on the system and had access and we could see everything from there, but the communication on that database was horrendous, as coming in as external providers using a new database that was really outdated and so much room for error. It was really challenging to navigate ourselves around that system as well, to sort of pinpoint and then refer on and sort of communicate with other people effectively. So if you'd get a phone call in from a young person, it would take you 5 minutes, 10 minutes to try and navigate around the system to try and find out the updates and things like that as well. But that communication going out then externally, there is nothing that we can do now, not being inside the council, to get that communication. Like Nicola says, you'd wait a week to get a response. So yeah, the communication is key in being able to circulate it to each other and have that access point as providers. Like Sophie's saying, she's got direct access, which is really good, but we don't have that anymore now that we're back at Navigator. So it'd be good to have a point of call, a base at the council where professionals can link together to say, right, okay, we're dealing with this, we're supporting with this person, you know, can we have a regular update and things like that? But none of that at the moment is available.
Councillor Davis.
So, reading between the lines, if you guys were to have access to some sort of internal portal that you could log, visit from Joe Blogs here, please can we have an update, and the officer has to put a response on, would that be beneficial to you guys? I understand your situation would be slightly different, so it might not work for you, but would that be more beneficial for you guys, a direct link to the council? And it would save you hours of time, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely. I think even just having, you know, for the amount of cases that we would get as a team, it depends on what, I'm not sure what the caseload numbers are like now, like per officer in the homeless prevention team. But if there was even an officer at the council that dealt directly with, you know, 18 to 25 prevention or something like that, at least just someone that we know we can speak to. Because there's just been a couple of times that I've sent emails where it's meant to be like the singles team manager or like the manager of the department, and then you just get an email back saying they no longer work for Hillingdon. So, and I get obviously a lot of it is agency staff at the moment. It's been hard to recruit, it's hard to retain, but it's just difficult. It's difficult for the officers as well. They don't always have a point of contact. When it's agency, you're new, so you're trying to learn a new area, a new system, different ways of working. When, like Zara said, you'll ask manager A, they'll tell you do it this way, manager B will say do it this way. So yeah, more structure and better communication.
Thank you, Sharon.
Sorry, just on that as well, it would actually, I think, just not even having to have a database or portal, it's just answering a phone call. Like, I think we've become a bit reliant on other things when just answering a phone call when we are discussing a case, because it can be a referral's been made, right, I'll be following that up in said day, this is what is going on, is that, or again having regular, like that in-person contact as well. Come to the Navigator Centre once a week or once a month, just have that catch up. Again, my workers, they can come to the Civic, see the case officers, just have that catch up. Right, I've got this on my caseload at the moment, what's going on? But again, there's been like the inconsistency with regards to managers who we go to, like the staff turnover. So, but I know that is being worked on.
Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for what you do, and in tremendous difficult times. I have a couple of questions. First, for a layperson like me, is there a low, medium and high support parameters which are for rough sleepers? So would they be same for you as charities and same for the councils when you're helping them out? And the other was, you mentioned some suggestions were sent in to the council, I believe, and I'm sure it included better communication and probably consistency. What else was there, and what kind of response did you get? Were you able to follow it up? Thank you.
So in terms of low, medium and high support, it's difficult for us because when we refer into supported accommodation, Trinity has low, medium and high support units. At the moment, Trinity is struggling themselves to buy more stock to be able to rent it out. YMCA will only take low support, and YMCA is in Haystown and it's just one tower block. There's just been incidents before where people have been high support needs in there and it's just not manageable. Therefore, if someone is high support, YMCA is full, they might only have 3 high support houses, no one's moving out there for 2 years, we would then have to go to the council. And my point is, if you're high support and you can't go into YMCA, or if we have a vacancy in a move-on flat, you can't go in there, you must surely be in priority need, and therefore must need temporary accommodation, interim accommodation, whilst the council assess, see if they can assist, and go from there. However, we're not finding that that's the case. Yeah, I'll just touch on the supported bit. I think when we deal with our rough sleepers who we deal with, I would personally say that a lot of our rough sleepers would be high support needs, because you don't become a rough sleeper without having a lot of support needs and a lot of things that you need to support with. So for us, we would advocate that all our rough sleepers are priority need, but obviously 90% probably are deemed non-priority need, and that's when our Olympic House Hostel comes in great, because they're a low to medium support need place, but they take a lot of RFLs. They have ramp on site, they have arch on site, they have GP on site, and they can do a lot of support, but they only have 30 bed spaces, and like Nicola was saying, their move on is really limited. We don't have the option, I don't know why, to refer to Trinity supported accommodation directly. We can't refer to YMCA directly, which is fine because we refer to P3, thanks. But we then become solely reliant on what the council have to offer, and unless our non-priority people there's a space available at Olympic House, we are then forced to support these people to find their own PRS accommodation. That's the only option we have. There's no other supported pathway available, and a lot of our people we work with that are deemed non-priority need, but they might have a mental health issue or they might have substance needs, but that's not deemed as priority need because it's not a high medical issue, but at the same time they can't go to general needs housing. They still can't sustain a tenancy in the same way that anyone else would. And so where do you go in between? Because they're not going to sustain a PRS, which is what the council is saying that we need to look for, but there's no pathway for them to go anywhere else. So that's where we're stuck.
Nicola, do you want to say anything?
There was another part of your question, wasn't there, about the feedback?
Yes.
Yeah.
The suggestions that you sent in.
Yeah, I believe they were just discussed in meetings, but it's been with managers. Is that correct?
Yeah. So with some of the suggestions that were put forward was for my team to ensure, obviously, in order to retain staff and for their own well-being, was the caseload, to ensure that all officers had a reduced caseload, a manageable one. Suggestion around with communication, regular meetings, supervisions, and what have you, and having that holistic approach. Someone at the time under the statutory duty, we weren't able to do that, but what we have now done is move the contract across over as an advice and prevention delivery service that we're currently being funded by the council to deliver still. So the suggestions may not have been taken in-house as such, but the new delivery model that we're currently providing at the moment incorporate the suggestions that we did give. So we are able to incorporate like the floating support to enable the move on. We are able to incorporate going into schools to educate around prevention, early intervention, and that partnership working like with the agencies. So it has been, part of it has been taken on board, but not, I don't think it's within the council itself with their own staff, but because we're able to do that with our staff because of how the contract is, if that sort of makes sense. Yeah.
Councillor Cool, would you like a supplementary?
Any red flags that you know, sometimes you said if there was person A and person B, they would do differently. Was there ever a time that person B was constantly the person B and you flagged it up, or no?
I would say, again, all managers have different ways of working. Everyone's got different ways of working. I would never say that anyone acted problematically or in a red flag way. Everyone has differences of opinion, and if you can have a different opinion, but the way that I work is I really want to help someone, and sometimes the council wants to save money. So that's kind of the way life is, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. We're coming on to nearly an hour into this item, so every member's had the chance to ask at least one question, so we now will go back to further questions from members. I have 4 councillors wishing to ask questions, so at this point, if I could politely request that the questions and the answers are kept a little bit more briefer in order to get through the business on the rest of the agenda. So we'll start with Councillor Punja.
Thank you. What I can hear is how bureaucracy is actually stifling progression. But in that space of bureaucracy, one of the things that I wanted to understand about is the banding systems and how you find the banding systems, because Thames Reach, I know you won't be dealing with this, but P3 do deal with this quite a lot, and how you find, because what I'm finding is you talked about medical issues being the kind of high priority needs, and yet so many people are put into overcrowding on that locator kind of platform rather than medical needs. That was assessed internally, but then P3 come in and go, well, these are medical issues. And so I just want to know about the banding system, because it just feels like the banding system for me is as bureaucratic as the rest of the system seems to be.
Yeah, I know that this has been discussed many times, like whilst I've worked at P3. At the moment on our contract that I'm working on now, we're more focused on homeless prevention. So on homeless prevention, from my side currently, we don't really look at banding and locator, because that's not a quick fix to get someone off the streets, or if they're going to be homeless next week, we're not going to look at banding. However, on our family advice service, we're constantly assisting with banding with people that have disabilities, illnesses, long-term conditions. That, yeah, definitely that does impact them. From seeing both sides, whilst I was at the council, I saw it is a constant battle for staff in the lettings department to try and stay on top of the amount of information that's coming in. You know, they're constantly working all around the clock, weekends, evenings, everything, trying to get all the information on. So I know that is ongoing. Sometimes as well, a lot of the information obviously has to be sent off to be assessed, it comes back, and then it's just long time frames. But I would say decisions are made based on the information given, and if the incorrect information is given, it takes a lot longer to get a decision. But from what I've found, when you make sure, like if you put in an ME or something like that, it will get looked into properly, and the correct banding can be given and backdated.
Okay. Councillor Gardner.
This is actually a statement. Well, maybe not. Am I right in assuming that it's actually a lottery view in terms of who you get to speak to in the housing department. Just bear in mind we have the director of housing sitting there. Well, no, I mean, we want the truth. That's why we're doing the scrutiny.
Can feel down by standing. No, there's a lot of amazing people that work in the Hillingdon Homeless Department, you know, so... And, you know, the only issue that I would say is just the consistency and having just consistency. When it's agency, you don't know who's coming, who's going, if a team is going to be the same tomorrow. It's unsettling for staff. It's unsettling for the public. You've got one housing officer one day, another one the next. But, you know, our interactions with council staff are always pleasant when you can speak to them.
I think for the young people, they find it more of a lottery. If you speak to them, they'll just be like, well, I got put through to reception, and then I got put through to this person. They said they'd call me back, and they never did. And then because, you know, they might not be at their desk at that time, and then the young people are frustrated, anxious, and they don't want to be calling back and things like that. So I think for them, it is more of a lottery. But like I say, when we've got direct contacts and you know the people at the council, you can get through. But having those contacts.
Anything further? No. Councillor Smallwood?
Thank you, Chair. Nicola, I just wanted to quickly clarify something you said around you send an email, you get an email that someone's left. I get the feeling there's nothing under there to go, now speak to Councillor Gohill. It just says this person has left.
No, it will give the next line manager, but obviously the amount of things, you know, that managers are dealing with in that department, they're not going to be aware of anything that you've been discussing with said person. So it will always give a follow-up person, but it would just be nice, you know, as partners, and you know, we're all working on the same thing, to just have a bit of a heads up.
So the two things we need here, I'm pleased we've got the director in the room because I think it's important that Dan's hearing this, right? Say what you need to say. The two things I think, Chair, are, like, I don't think it's hard to put a Venn diagram out of our staff, right? That is pretty basic and simple stuff. If we can't manage that, then probably we have got a problem, right? I can go onto the council website right now if I wanted to on my email and find a Venn diagram of staff quite easily. So making sure, not necessarily every single user gets it, because that could create problems for officers, but at least our professional partners should be able to get hold of that, and making sure that we've got quality handovers of cases. I think those are the two big things that I'm hearing tonight. And the first one we should be able to resolve by tomorrow. And it shouldn't even be a problem, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Sorry, with that, it's also sometimes you don't actually even get the out of office that they've left. So I've been emailing someone and in a meeting today, I was like, oh, I'm meeting yourself, and so no, they've actually left now. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, just.
Councillor Davis.
Chairman, my one being new to the committee, can we request some information on how many staff we have on there from agency in the housing team? I'm not sure if this is the right time to raise that, but it's quite concerning to think that we've got temporary staff working in something that's not a temporary measure, it's a permanent measure. So it's quite concerning, and for you guys, I couldn't think of anything worse than that. So I would say sorry that you've had to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point now, I think it's probably appropriate to invite Dan to make any closing statements you wish to make, as having heard it throughout the evening.
Sounds like I need to leave the room. I mean, it is. I'm not going to, defend poor communications and practice. We do need to improve, and in fact, it's. I was talking to Councillor Bridges earlier in the week and Councillor Davis that one of the opportunities I'd like is to present back to committee the plan that we are working on to improve. So I know, and it's difficult, isn't it, because we haven't been able to break through some of those improvements just yet. But I know we're working on a workforce plan to run a recruitment campaign to bring in permanent staff and exit agency staff who, we all know there's some brilliant agency staff, but not every agency staff is brilliant, and we need excellence in Hillingdon for our residents. We're also working on a sort of customer care program as well, and I'm going to be spending some time on Monday in the contact centre, and just hearing the sort of the experience of our residents and what their sort of response is to inquiries. So we've got a lot to do, and I am pleased to say we have moved away from the jigsaw system to the locator system, the casework system now. So we are embedding that. So there's a lot going on, but it's like everything. We just got to get to the breakthrough point. Demand is relentless. I mean, I think last week we had 140 homelessness and housing advice inquiries, and out of those, about 90 convert to allocated casework. So, and that's probably up 30% on several years ago. So, and it's and it is a very, very challenging situation for our residents, many of which find themselves faced for the first time with homelessness, being evicted from private rented accommodation, typically, and we're seeing high volumes of presentations from home office placements as well. So it's however, it's my job to work with the teams and work with the partners to get that fixed. So we're working on it. And however, I've picked up and taken away a few points. I think what we need to do through what is quite good in Hillingdon is the singles and rough sleeper partnership. I think that really works well, and it's a great place actually to work with Trinity, P3, Thames Reach, StreetLink, and others. So we've got the infrastructure. We've just got to get better at actually saying what we're doing, what we're working on, and sort of bear with us while we make some of these changes.
Thank you, Dan. And finally, from our witnesses, is there anything further you wish to say or ask, indeed, of us before we close? Okay. Thank you. In that case, thank you very much for your attendance. It's been really informative, and it will help this committee greatly in putting together some sound recommendations to implement at cabinet level. So thank you. You may leave if you wish to do so. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda. So we'll just give you a moment to vacate the room. Item 6, our graffiti removal service, pages 23 to 30, and we are joined this evening by Nicola. Welcome. There'll be no presentation on this item. We will go straight to questions from members. So I invite questions from members. We'll start with Councillor Gohill, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hi. I was just wondering, there was a 27% figure on page 26. It said in March 2023, as part of a review of the service contracts, it was identified that only 27% of graffiti removal works were completed in response to an online report, with the rest relating to proactive scoping by the supplier. I just wanted to know, get a bit more information about that figure. Is that an improvement or a reduction based on previous years? Is it, did it go from 50% to 27%, or did it go from like 2% to 20%, 27%? I just wanted to get a bit more clarity about that figure, if possible.
I can try to go back to get data to compare against it. It was more anecdotal that we were very aware that we had two teams of two people that were spending a lot of time scoping, and we weren't receiving a high number of reports in comparison to that. So it was taken on the decision that if 73% of their time was spent looking for work, then it was potentially not the best use of resources.
Follow-up, yeah.
Yeah, I got a follow-up. It's unrelated, but I just wanted to ask how effectively the graffiti removal service collaborates with other entities that are responsible for different services, for example, TfL with bus stops and shelters. I know I've had my own example in my ward where getting a bus shelter that had graffiti and like a smashed window took nearly 6 months of constant badgering to TfL. So is that typical of an experience that you have across the borough?
So those reports go directly to TfL for their responsibility, so I haven't got a number or a record of how long those cases take in general, but there have been times where they have escalated to us, it's taking too long, can you step in? And we have done on those cases.
Councillor Gardner.
A couple of things, actually. I'd like to know how the success of this is actually being monitored, but I'm also concerned that said the supplier is expected to remove graffiti and fly posting. Is that after you've given him the job to do, or is it some? I mean, there's loads of graffiti, and sorry, it's not graffiti, it's tags. There's tagging. There is a difference. And also there are lots of fly posting. I mean, it worries me that you can report a graffiti on a utility box when it's next to, for argument's sake, a traffic lights that's got something cars for sale, yet the graffiti will be cleaned and the fly posting or whatever it is, they're put on with hooks, aren't they, hasn't been removed. Do they not do anything? Do they have to work on a docket, basically? You know what I mean?
No, they should be scoping as part of their works as well. So any cases like that, if they can be highlighted, then we can work with the contractor to understand why. If they had a day where they had a particular number of jobs because they are working on an SLA and they were rushing to, that could be a reason. If it was more than, so in your example, there was one bit of fly posting next to it, but quite often with those fly posting, you actually find it's on every traffic light, on every junction, and so it takes a little bit of time to do, but they should be doing it proactively as and when they can. So any examples where that's not being done, please let me know.
Any follow-up, Councillor Gardner?
Expect a list from me tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually really pleased that we've got this item before the next one, because actually this is the one bit of ASB that I actually find is dealt with quite well, reasonably quickly, and it's one of the things when you walk past as a councillor, when you reported it, it's actually been dealt with at a relatively quick pace. And I even tested that because I was actually going to Heathrow Airport recently and had the pleasure of being in Councillor Gardner's ward, where I saw a bit of graffiti and and was interested to see if I got a third party to report it, whether it would be cleared up as quickly. And it was only a couple of bits, and it actually was. So I'm just interested in what we think the good practice is here, that possibly we could learn across other parts of ASB, across the council services, because actually I find this is something that's, unlike some other things, dealt with relatively quickly and at quite an efficient pace, especially when it's homophobic racist or really bad, which I actually say fair play for them to getting out quite quickly to it.
I can't speak for every area of ASB, and I know that there's lots of complexities in that area and lots of different partnership working. It's happening quickly because we're cleaning it up. There's very little investigation that's involved in that, purely because it's very hard to identify an offender. If there was a pattern, then that's absolutely recorded and it's shared. But it's similar to fly tipping in the sense of report it, we clear it, and we can get that back on track, because we haven't got that long drawn-out process behind it all the time.
Councillor Smallwood?
I think we all want to see our high streets looking as clean and tidy as possible, and one of the places I've noticed that is an issue with high streets across the borough is actually when someone's been a naughty boy or girl at night and they've been spray painting the sort of shutters of a shop. Now often the shops are open by the time possibly the team are there. Would it be possible to look at maybe doing a borough-wide project where we go around, as we suddenly got a bit of light, in the evenings, it's late into the evening, the sun is rising early, sounds like poetry, but could we have some sort of a project across our high street to go and clean up some of those shutters that may get missed during the day because, of course, the shop's open?
Yes, we tend to find that a lot of them are still reported if it's either by the public or by the business owner. The challenge that we have is that the business doesn't necessarily want to close the shutter for us to complete the work during their opening hours. Because it's a private business, our response would normally be, okay, well, you would need to clean it yourself outside of those hours. There's no statutory requirement for us to be removing it from private property. I think we see it as quite a fair policy that we will. But if that was something that we wanted to explore, yes, we could definitely look at after hours working.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Chairman. So I just want to touch on fly posting. So how quick do we get fly posting removed? because I know for a fact when a fun fair fly post across my ward, half of Hayes Town, etc., then they're not given permission for that. Why do we approach the fairs and take it down? And if so, have we charged them for doing that?
No, we're not charging them for removing it. I think the evidence is gathered and it's passed across to the ASB team, but again, it's quite challenging, particularly these kind of scrapped vehicles. The numbers change so regularly. There's not really the trail there, so it is a case of remove it. I will accept that I think most of our reports come in for graffiti, and that is the priority above fly posting. We've also got a number of street cleansing teams across the borough who are more equipped to help with removing fly posting. So we do put the emphasis onto the contractor to focus on graffiti and to support with fly posting. And I think the reports that come in for fly posting are significantly lower as well. I haven't included that, but I can get that information for you.
Councillor Davis?
I find it quite hard to understand why the fly posting isn't actioned on quicker, because, for example, a fun fair or a music event, there's a telephone number. The fun fair, we've got a location of where they're based. Say for Joe Smith's Steam Fair, we've got a name, an address and a business. Why are we not challenging that? That's quick and easy funds for the council.
Yes, Richard.
Thank you, if I may. Just a couple of observations. I totally agree with the principle. The offence for fly posting, as I understand it, is the person who puts the sign up, not the person or the company that they've done it for. So we have to actually evidence who put the sign up. Now, I take your point, we could look at whether we could charge the organiser. I think my experience of where that's been attempted at other places, it's very problematic to try and pursue, say, a fun fair when it's quite hard to identify the legal person responsible who may have commissioned a signpost to go up, who won't just pay. When you have to pursue it to court, it becomes a loss rather than a gain. Right. But I take the point. I think it's valid. Thank you.
Before I go on to the next question, I will just share Councillor Davis' concern, which is why I've asked Liz to actually add that as an item on an information report in the future regarding fly posting, particularly fun fairs, which do have a licence from the council to act on our land. And also, if we look at political parties in particular, where they have an imprint at the bottom, and we are the first ones they approach if we are fly posts. Not that we would do it, of course, but or indeed that side. But if there's a point of contact for political parties, I don't see why there shouldn't be for a commercial business. Councillor Punja?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get an understanding of where the reporting has come from, because it basically, if all graffiti, is it just reported then and then cleaned up? So there's no scoping done whatsoever now?
There is scoping done still, but the priority is unreported because they have an SLA to do it. So that's what the start of their day will be. This is your list of jobs. That goes through to their tablet. They complete those. They've still got some working time, so there'll be scoping going to those areas that they've said that they notice are most common and removing. But yeah, there's a mixture of both, but the swing has gone from where it was 73% of the time scoping. There's now significantly more time spent on reported work.
So therefore, whilst that 73% of the time was spent on scoping, I find that actually the areas that are put in here for your hotspots, is that what is that based on? Is that based on reporting or is it based on scoping?
That's anecdotal, based on scoping. Yeah.
So therefore, why would it not be based on what is reported? Because
they're removing it before it's reported in those areas when they're scoping. So those are areas that they know have a high amount of graffiti, so they go to that area and proactively remove in that area before reports are received.
Yeah, that I get that, but it's basically focused around dry slip and haze, and that's like 2 wards of a whole borough that has got, I mean, usually, for example, my ward is full of graffiti. We report it, but I just don't understand why other areas, Uxbridge, for example, there are places in Uxbridge which are quite harmful, and I just don't, I appreciate that you've got a 2-man team almost going around doing this, but I feel like there's not a broad spec of scoping, it's just kind of really concentrated into 2 parts of the borough.
I appreciate why it appears that way because these places are listed. The way that the reporting is received for proactive work is in Excel databases because they're not responding to a report, they're showing that way. So it would have been really time intensive to get all of that information together and to list it specifically. So it was just an anecdotal question to the teams of where do you feel you're working the most in that way. It's not the only places that they go to.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you. Just based on my previous question, so you mentioned that if TfL don't for some reason don't clean up the graffiti or whatever on a bus shelter, they ask yourselves, they ask the council to do it. Is that correct?
No, that would be where we were receiving potentially a complaint to say that we've passed this to TfL, a certain amount of time has passed, or where the glass is smashed, this bus stop is unsafe. That's where we would step in to support. So TfL don't refer their cases to us.
By step in to support, do you mean doing it yourselves? And do you then claim that money back from TfL because we're spending money on contractors?
We don't, but it doesn't happen regularly.
Why not? Why don't we claim it back? Sorry.
Yeah, I guess there isn't that arrangement there to do so, and TfL would probably do it themselves.
I feel like we should be, Chair. Genuinely, if we could include that in somewhere, because
unfortunately this is an information item, not a review, but I would certainly minute it.
No,
we can take it away and look at it.
I'll also look into it. My second question, if it's okay, how much are we saving by contracting this out? I'm not saying I actually think they do a good job, but I reported under a subway graffiti and it got cleared within I think 4 hours, so they did a really good job. But how much are we saving? Because it said at the beginning of the report it's cheaper to contract it, but how much are we saving? Is it $5,000? Is it is it $100,000? Like, how much are we saving?
It has been some time since it's been fully costed. Even the type of vehicles that they use, where they're carrying the water on board at the volume that they are, they're specialist vehicles and they're very hard to get hold of. We did have a look at that last year and we weren't able to get one at any reasonable time. I think the real value of the saving comes from the fact that they are trained employees and what they're using chemical-wise, and they have to make more of a judgment in how they're going to treat each case than potentially some of our other street cleansing staff. And so if we brought that in-house, we would need a higher number of people trained to that level to ensure that cover was consistent. Whereas our other street cleansing works, they operate more easily because it's more of a task of could you go and pick this up or could you move that, and it's a lower level of training in terms of standards and sitting in courses to understand how to deal with chemicals correctly. So we're gaining the benefit of them replenishing their staff and covering leave, and also when we have a higher need for services, they provide them. So they provide a service rather than a set number of people.
I have a very, very small, it's related.
Yeah, go on.
I know there are contracts coming up in November this year. Before that comes up, is there a review of how much we need, how much we're spending, as well as will we be looking at other suppliers as well? Just I'm thinking about the cost effectiveness and this is a 3-year contract, 2021 to now. Just given inflation and everything, it might be worth shopping around. Is that something that your department's going to do?
What we tend to do is market research before we make the decision about whether we retender or if we extend. I think there's a benefit in having that extension in place, and we've also demonstrated that we've made savings throughout the life of the contract already. But we would definitely be meeting with other suppliers, understanding if there's any emerging technologies that we're missing out with our current supplier. And at that point, we'll make the call whether we retender.
If I could just piggyback on Councillor Gohill's question about the What was she saying? It's regarding the contractors. If they damage private property, are they liable, not the council? If so, I assume that's a saving in itself, isn't it?
They would ensure with the business owner before they remove it that an indemnity is signed, that they're not responsible.
So the council's risk-free on that front. Councillor Davis?
Chairman, I could talk about this all night, to be honest. All of a sudden I've just found hundreds of questions, but I'd love to talk about, like, alligators. Where do I start? Scoping. Do we rely on other council resources to point out hotspots, items, and stuff like that?
Yes, our own street cleansing teams are modelled in ward areas, and so they would report back that this has appeared in this area. I wouldn't want to say that's every single tag that appears and every size, but yes, if there was a large item that was noticeable, they would.
Chairman, I have one more question. Just looking on page 26, we can see the savings from 2019 to 2020. It's around 50k. How has that changed from 2022 to 2024? How have we managed to save 50k within less than 12 months, or just over 12 months? What has driven that saving?
So there used to be 2 teams, and now there is 1 team full-time with additional resource as needed. So we're not paying full-time for 2. The second team's just paid for as and when.
So it's solely just cutting 1 team and save that money? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Cool?
Thank you, Chair. On page 25, the data that you say is 12-month data. Is it just the public reporting, or does it also include the members' inquiries?
That would be both, members and public.
Thank you. And on page 27, where you say, you mentioned offences and fines and everything, is there a data on number of people who received the fines? Do we have any data on that? How many people were fined for those offences?
None. Nobody was identified as adding the graffiti. It's very hard to catch somebody in the act to do it.
Councillor Gardner?
Well, graffiti stroke tagging is antisocial behaviour, yeah. Do you or the antisocial behaviour team actually work with the police? Because a lot of the taggers are school kids. And if you go into schools, it's quite likely if you give the police or somebody a picture of the tag, they will know who's doing it, because I know from speaking to mums, the kids tag their books, they tag their desks. I just wonder if there could be some sort of education thing on that, because the guys and the girls that tag are not going to go up and do the really decent graffiti that is basically artwork. That's why I don't like it being called graffiti, basically. But is there any chance that you could work with the police to actually get them? Because there are delegated police officers in schools, aren't they? So they could just go around and say to the teachers, do you know anybody who does this squiggle? Just a thought.
I must admit, in the time I've been here, I don't believe we've done that. I can ask the team. Obviously, approaching the teachers would be the best option. So I'll take that away, actually. I don't know whether we've tried it before, but I will find out.
Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions, and that is it for me, I promise. Private property, when we clear graffiti off a private property, do we charge the property owners?
No, we don't.
Is there a reason why?
I think there hasn't been a charging mechanism set up, and we've also found that it's quicker removal if we do it without. I think it's something that was in our proposals to consider going forward, but no, it hasn't been at the moment.
Okay. So would we look at using like a community protection order to enforce that on private landowners? Because I could see, say it was a large site, EMI building in Hayes or something like that had been tagged, that would be a substantial cost to us as a council, I would say.
I know Richard wants to come in, but we generally find that anything larger than an individual business or a single shop, they remove their own, We're not very often doing large scale on private properties.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may, that is something that Nicola and I discussed a few months ago, and we've sought some legal advice on that point about what the right process to do to make sure that we can recover the cost. So I totally agree with principle, and we are exploring that.
Perfect. And my final question, Chairman, is when you paint something like a utility box, etc., they pop a nice bit of tape on it that says wet paint, but they actually stick it to wet paint, and it's left there for a number of weeks, months. Is there a process to get these removed? So we're not seeing them for days on end or weeks on end when we don't need to.
I'll take that on board. Obviously, with this coming up, I've been more aware of the graffiti move around the borough and have noted the same. So I will look at how we can make sure that that's followed up.
If we look at the evidence photos in page 28, you can actually see two. I'm assuming the Royal Mail post box has had that, and same with the wall. So yeah, it'd be great if we could. Thank you.
Yeah, potentially do some partnership working with our ward teams on that too.
Okay, if I could just finish then on some questions in regards to private properties. You say in the report we need the permission from the landowner. First question is the council creating a lot of cost for doing land registry searches to identify the landowner? And secondly, when you get the permission, how is that obtained in the future? Do you just get permission, clear it, and then mark it as complete? Or hopefully, I'm hoping you'll say yes to this one, is that we get the permission from the landowner, we clear it, but we keep that permission on record for the foreseeable until that land ownership changes, and in which case we can just go straight in and clear it without any delay whatsoever.
Yeah, on most cases it is, again, like an individual shop with a shutter, and so it's a case of going into the shop and speaking to the business owner at the time. So it's not aware of any times where we've had to use a land registry search in order to achieve permission.
So not on a block of flats or anything like that?
Normally the managing agent would remove that themselves.
Okay.
I think there's very few cases where we've done that on their behalf.
And the long-term permissible sort of in writing in terms of removing graffiti long-term, is that something we do? Or
it's not because we're getting direct permission at the time of doing it, but again, something to take on board.
Do we get something in writing each time we do?
But they would sign the disclaimer.
They'll sign the disclaimer, okay. Okay, I think that's everyone, unless there's any other questions. No? Okay. Nicola, thank you very much for your attendance this evening. We'll go on to our next item, which is the ASB service update, pages 31 to 54. And we have Richard with us this evening. Good evening, Richard. There will be no presentation with this item as the last one, so we will go straight to questions, and we'll start with Councillor Smallwood, please.
Chair, I want to start in a really simple place. Ward names, right? I was left completely confused. I mean, first of all the ward names. West Ryslip doesn't exist anymore. There is no ward called New Road, Hillingdon. I'm guessing it's Hillingdon West, but it's not there. And then I cannot believe, as much as I like to think Ryslip is the centre of the universe and the greatest place to live in the world, which it is, and the best ward in the borough, I cannot believe that there was only one fixed penalty notice available in Ryslip. I mean, we have Ryslip Lido. I could literally take you up there this evening after this meeting, and between us, we could probably find 10 fixed penalty notices. But actually, there's a serious point. Like that leaves residents around there incredibly frustrated if they see we're not taking action on these things. So I'm just a bit confused about where these stats have come from, how they're accumulated, what West Ryslip and Ryslip means, whether they're meant to be together. I just wanted to start off with how we put the stats into these spreadsheets before I come on to any actual concerns around fixed penalty notices, antisocial behaviour, and the work of the ASBIT team.
Yeah, thank you. So the ward data, unfortunately our systems are not great. So one of our team basically has to create and maintain a spreadsheet. So that's the segregation that they've used on the spreadsheet. Appreciate it probably doesn't quite align with your perceptions and recognise ward boundaries. It's partly because it's the way we organise some of our teams and deployments that has led to that terminology being used. But I take your point, and it's not helpful. In relation to Ruislip, in terms of the environmental enforcement officers, so those statistics where they've got the wards relate to the deployed environmental enforcement officers. Up until we renewed the PSPO, there was very little we could actually do, those officers could actually do at Ruislip on Lido in relation to some of the issues being reported. We bizarrely don't get a lot of reports from residents about antisocial behaviour, a lot about parking and littering, but not a lot about antisocial behaviour as such. And the PSPO now includes things like use of amplification equipment, which is where one of the problems was before, but that wasn't in any way prohibited up until we renewed the PSPO, so that may well change over this summer.
Councillor Smallwood?
I think the statistics could be wider. I think, and I've got to remember, I think this is serviced out by the council in terms of our parking ticket regime. But I'd like to know things we're doing on things like fly posting, dog fouling, illegal drop curbs, other forms of antisocial behaviour, barbecuing, dog fouling are two things that we could have easily done back in relation to the Lido, but could have done anywhere else in the borough. So it'd be interesting to see what resource the council is putting into those things, how many people we have out trying to tackle those, whether we have hotspots that we know those are going particularly on, because I think some of these numbers feel incredibly low, and that we're maybe not, we're good at some of the things we're subcontracting out, but I can't see some of the numbers and some of the statistics I would have expected for some of the other things that I don't believe we're subcontracting out.
That's correct. The vast majority of fixed penalty notices or enforcement action taken by the contracted service, of which there's 11 environmental enforcement officers for the borough to cover all on a rota basis and on shifts. So it's not a lot of people, and recognising that in most cases to actually issue a fixed penalty notice you have to witness it. So littering, for example, dog fouling, you'd actually have to witness the owner of the dog and be able to identify the dog owner to be able to issue the fixed penalty notice. In-house we have there's 9 officers in the street scene and enforcement team, plus 4 out-of-hours noise officers, and they would tend to carry out the more investigative work around things like abandoned vehicles, persistent noise complaints, some of the other types of issues that you see. We get a large majority of a large number of complaints about rubbish accumulation, fly tipping in particular. So the resources is spread very thinly.
Councillor Gohill?
Thank you. My first question is kind of off the back of Councillor Smallwood's questions. What criteria are used to determine the deployment of your environmental enforcement officers in specific areas?
To a great extent, our deployments are based on areas where we know there are particular problems, areas where we know there's more concern, and areas where our data will show there's higher contravention. So we will deploy, in particular, we deploy frequently to places like Lido. As you'll see, areas around Heathrow Airport are particularly problematic mainly because of private hire vehicles waiting in the residential streets and littering, which is why we deploy a lot there. And then the high streets, much more densely populated, a lot of littering offences. So it's very much, it's a lot driven by residents and the complaints that we get, which tells us where the bigger problems are, as well as our own intelligence of where there are hotspots and issues, and we flex that regularly through the year. So it's not a standing arrangement. We would always redeploy almost on a weekly basis based on what we're hearing.
I do have a follow-up. And my follow-up is, at what point has there been any kind of cost-benefit analysis done in these particular hotspot areas where the use of installing a camera, like an ANPR camera or something, to catch drivers or people or taxi drivers, idling their cars on residential streets, would probably be more time beneficial and cost beneficial over the long term, rather than sending a traffic officer every now and then. I'm just thinking in areas like Heathrow Villages that could make a huge impact, and also allow those who are employed to go into other areas of of other areas of Hillingdon. I know in Colin I could tell you 20 different places to go, and you'd pick up over 100 FPNs in a day, but there's only 8 that's been picked up. So and I appreciate resources are spread thin, but my question is, have these other avenues been explored? More creative ways of picking up on people breaching these PSBOs?
Unfortunately, a lot of the offences can't be enforced through cameras. I'd like to say they could, particularly around Heathrow, but 2 reasons. Firstly, there's the privacy impact of putting cameras on dense residential streets, where you to cover enough of the street to mean you could get evidential quality images of the person, because the vehicle's not good enough. We have to have evidence to identify the person. Where the street is lined with houses is practically impossible. And secondly, you do have to identify the person. So having an image of a vehicle and someone dropping litter out of the vehicle doesn't give us evidence to issue a fixed punch notice to the register keeper. We have to identify the person.
Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, the list of FPNs here on page 36, no FPN for fly tipping, not even a single one. And also, there are places where there is CCTV, where it says no dumping waste and the CCTV, and then still it has the biggest dump of fly tip there.
Thank you. So, yeah, thank you. I just found it. So, the majority of I need to take that away and check. We issue quite a few fixed penalty notices for fly tipping, where generally we've identified the person responsible. So. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it's not featured on that list. I need to take that away and check, and to come back to you, if I may, with a accurate sort of figure on fly tipping fixed penalty notices. Sorry, and the second question was? I missed the second question.
Just wondering if the CCTVs around the areas which are fly tipping hotspots pointing in the right direction or high quality enough, because there are places where you constantly see huge fly tips just under the cameras.
Yeah, so we do get our CCTV control room will generate a number of what we call evidential packages for fly tipping each month. The process then involves investigating to try and identify the person that we can see. So it's great if we've got a vehicle and we can track the vehicle back and we can identify a company that owns the vehicle, and there's an investigative line that we can pursue for that. If there isn't, we will often try door knocks in the area. If we can see it's someone who's come from a block of flats, we will go and inquire in the doors. But quite often we end up with the image of it happening, but without being able to actually identify the individual to enough confidence to be able to issue a fixed penalty notice or take another action. But we do have quite a lot of work going on generated by our CCTV cameras.
Councillor Gardner?
Yeah, on, I think it's page 32 and 33, is there any reason for the growth in terms of the fines and the problems that have been reported? And also, how can an infestation of rats or mice be an antisocial behaviour? That worried me, actually.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. So we consider it part of the work of the team. In many cases it wouldn't be antisocial behaviour, but often it is in a way, because often the infestation is linked to people allowing their gardens to get so overgrown that it provides safe harbourage for rats or mice, allowing rubbish to be left out for a period of time so there's a food source. So you get problems with rats or mice where you get poor control of human factors, so land, waste, businesses failing to control their waste. So we in this broader sense, deal with it in the same way as we deal with antisocial behaviour, but the legal framework might be very different. It might be about dealing with waste accumulations rather than environmental protection kind of notices for antisocial behaviour. And in terms of the growth, I think across the country, all local authorities have seen a growth in antisocial behaviour reports over the last few years, and we've certainly experienced it here. Different categories. I think COVID led to more people working at home, which led to more people complaining about neighbour noise. More people working at home has continued, so you get more people complaining about things like their neighbours' noise during the day when they're trying to work. And fly tipping has gone through the roof across the country because of, well, a whole range of factors, and the cost of disposal of waste, charging for DIY waste and other reasons have just meant that things like fly tipping have just increased. And then the cost of living will drive issues will drive behaviours with like abandoning vehicles where people wouldn't have done that before, or a sort of a choosing or allowing their property, their sort of gardens, to become unkempt and unsightly, and potentially as an invitation to neighbours. So we're seeing a whole range of factors just driving the numbers, unfortunately, up pretty consistently over the last few years.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back to a point, and it's a shame Dan's gone, actually, because ultimately, I guess, it's his responsibility as the director. I was surprised to hear that as we attempt digital transformation, we're still working off Excel spreadsheets. Is there a plan to try and make that a bit more streamlined and put into a digital form? I'm not going to sit here and suggest I've got the answer, but is there a way of getting that digital? And I think it would be really good to delve into to next time we get these statistics, see the fixed penalty notice, whatever the issue, by ward, so we can sort of get a breakdown by ward, because obviously that must be in the spreadsheet because you must have drawn it off here, but also the plans around how we hotspot certain things, right? I know we joked about Russell Blythe and we were having a little bit, but actually it's true, right? Go there at 6 o'clock on a hot day and I can rest assure you, you'll get a bunch of fly tipping, a bunch of littering, you'll get barbecues, and you may even catch a dog fowler, right? If you had a couple of people up there plain clothes, and I don't want to spy on our residents, that's not my style in any way, or any of the beliefs that I have, but ultimately there are some hotspots, and I'd just be interested to hear how we target those on specific days and specific areas, not just in relation to the one I mentioned.
Yeah, thank you. So in relation to hotspots, is picking a Lido. This year we've agreed with the police we will do a number of joint evening operations. So our environmental enforcement officers will be there through the evening along with some police. The police support is very welcome, and it's very helpful because obviously our environmental enforcement officers, if they witness the kind of behaviours they refer to, they approach the individual and they have to say, what's your name, what's your address, otherwise we can't issue, or we'll struggle to enforce a fixed penalty notice. So having the police with us will help. So we'll be doing that a few times this year, and that hopefully will have an impact. We do quite a lot of operations over the course of a year where we would identify areas that we've got particular problems, and often it's around things like densely populated areas where you've got houses over the top of businesses where there's no easy place to put your bins and rubbish, people leaving rubbish out wrong days, bags being ripped open, lots of littering. So we'll spend a day in that area talking to all the businesses, talking to as many residents as we can, looking at options and trying to find ways in which we can manage that problem better. So we probably do about one of those a month based on where we're seeing the most problems reported to us, or where we're seeing problems we can't solve without putting more time into engaging with people. In terms of the systems, I totally agree with you. We are implementing a new case management system. Supplier's been contracted, it's being configured as we speak. One of the challenges I have, and I'll be honest about this, is we're tying our managers' hands behind their backs. I don't think we're giving anywhere near good enough customer service. We regularly find we are not keeping people informed of progress. I'm committed to changing that, but we need to change the system to change that, because our managers can't see the cases our teams are working on. They can't easily be able to see this case has gone 2 weeks and nobody's contacted the resident. The system we've procured will enable them to do that, and it will give us much better performance information. But it takes ICT have had to put 80 days into work into configuring the system before we can think about setting it up to be able to use it and train and getting people on it. So it's quite a long process, but we will get there, I'm convinced.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Yeah, I must concur that the Excel spreadsheet on page 36 is a bit of a shock, especially as it states that Charville is the best ward in Hillingdon, because it's not even on it. So nice to have Charville above Ruislip for a change, but we'll leave ward work alone. Fly tipping for commercial premises. When we go in and speak to these owners of the businesses, I know across all wards we've got these problems. Do we do checks to see if they've got commercial bins? Do we see if they've got bin contracts, etc.? Because that, to me, would be something that we should be able to look at enforcing down the line. If a commercial business doesn't have a waste collection contract, we should be able to enforce on that.
Yes, absolutely. So part of the operations I just mentioned, when we speak to the businesses, we will check their contracts to ensure they have a proper commercial waste contract, disposal contract in place, and if they haven't, we will issue a warning, and we'll go back in a month and check, and if they haven't, then we will issue, we'll take enforcement action.
Perfect. So I have one more, if I may. The PSPOs, the figures that we've got here, are they from solely our staff or from third parties as well? So do we have a partner that we work with, etc., then figures from them as well?
Yes, so our contracted environmental enforcement service will issue fixed penalty notice of breach of the PSPO provisions. For example, if someone's using a loudspeaker to sell things in Uxbridge High Street, the environmental enforcement officers will issue the fixed penalty notice rather than our team.
One very quick one. Could we get a list of the full PSPOs?
I will probably mention that when I sort of have a couple of
Chair.
questions as well. Who have we got next? Councillor Gurryhill.
Thank you. 2 questions. One should be hopefully quite easy for you. Could you just explain the difference between an actionable report versus a non-actionable report?
Yes, so we get a lot of reports, as the data shows, each month that for one reason or another the team can't action. So a typical example might be that the resident has made a report, but it doesn't fly tipping, but it's not, for example, got sufficient location details to mean we can identify the waste, which can be quite challenging, because if you report on a long road somewhere and you say just give the road address, we can't check the whole road to try and find that bin bag you're complaining about. We will go back to the resident and ask for more details, but often they just don't reply. So we just possibly because it's been cleared by that time, and so we can't action it. Abandoned vehicles might be another one, where someone's reported an abandoned vehicle. We do a quick check and it's taxed and it's MOT'd and it's parked legally. We can't, unless we've got good grounds to think it's actually abandoned, like it's damaged and it's clearly undrivable, we'll just say that's unactionable because it's not an abandoned vehicle.
Thank you. And my second question is around comms. We've heard a lot about comms this evening, and internal comms especially. Could you explain to us how your department works along with other council departments to help tackle antisocial behaviour, and in particular in relation to housing? So, where we have social tenants, if they are causing a nuisance to their communities as being part of there, we hear a lot about it in case where I do anyway in my ward. Are those instances being cross-referenced with your department and theirs, and is there anything you can improve on as well? I'd like to get quite an honest picture if possible.
Yeah, so we broadly divide up who deals with antisocial behaviour relating to either our housing properties or our tenants on the basis of if it's an identifiable tenant that is behaving in breach of their tenancy, so it's on or around their property, then our tenancy management team in housing will lead the work, because it becomes then a housing matter rather than an environment and social behaviour sort of environmental enforcement issue. If, however, it's more unidentified people, more persistent problematic behaviours by groups, say, for example, in some of our tower blocks and in the stairwells, and homeless people going in and using drugs and sleeping in them, then my teams will lead that work. So there's a regular, almost daily discussions about who's best to lead this piece of work, which is the best way of dealing with the problem, which is the underlying reason for going one way or the other. And of course, with Nicola's team, a lot of fly tipping is quite quickly is assessed that there's no investigative angle, so Nicola's teams will be asked to clear the waste up rather than us going to investigate it. So the team's very much working across the council, green spaces in particular as well, around who's responsible, what options, contractors can we engage to address this problem, and the CCTV team in particular about what opportunities there are through CCTV to identify who's responsible. So I think, broadly, I think they're very well linked and engaged. I think the gap we know there is sometimes is where on those estates kind of areas where it's more, there's a bit of a mix of, some antisocial behaviour, some tenancy kind of management issues, but also some maintenance kind of issues where it's actually, if we improve certain areas on the estate, it might make things better for residents and reduce the likelihood of, say, rough sleeping going on in sheds. And then it becomes a job for the new team we've created, the Antisocial Behaviour and Localities team, to convene a sort of a cross-council, and often involving the police and others as well, action plan around that issue.
Councillor Punjar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to move away from fly tipping and all of those things. I have two questions. One around those densely populated buildings that we're talking about, especially when they're owned by private development companies, in which the management companies are not maintaining those properties, not fixing the properties, and then we have got a huge amount of antisocial behaviour coming off of the street and crime coming into those spaces. And I know the first point of call is the police, but I would like to also ask, when does it become a relationship between the council, the police and that management company to kind of go into fixing this, the situations that are causing the residents real harm and issue, because antisocial behaviour has to be about the environment that they live in, and if it isn't being maintained, what are we doing to kind of make sure that people who come into our borough as management agents, developers and that, are actually going to look after the buildings in our borough and make sure that all the things that you want to talk about in maybe social housing that is owned by the council, but how can we do that as well with private developers, because that is a real issue, especially amongst the developed south of the borough.
Yeah, thank you. That is challenging. I can't really comment on what we do proactively to ensure those social landlords who are coming into the borough are, I don't know if we do anything or through housing to make sure they're going to act responsibly and manage the properties. My teams tend to get involved when there are problems being reported by residents. We've had a number recently, and what one of the benefits of the restructure the paper talks about is by creating the Antisocial Behaviour and Localities team, that gives a bit of capacity now for us to focus on those more complex antisocial behaviour cases where it's not as straightforward as perhaps identifying who's abandoned the vehicle or who's done this fly tipping, but it will involve quite a bit of work, and particularly engaging with social landlords. So we've had one or two recently where we've had to pull the social landlord in and kind of challenge them about their actions they've taken about an individual tenant, because all the reports other tenants in the same building are making to us about people coming in and drug dealing in the premises. Yeah. And then of course you've got also often underlying this, you've got risks around cuckooing and vulnerable people being exploited, which may be a factor, so bringing in our social care teams. The relationship with those social landlords can be quite tricky, because often they are a bit more reluctant to act than we would want, and perhaps our housing teams, our own housing team, would act. But hopefully the new social housing regulator and their standards will help with that, because it's quite clear in those standards that there is social housing, regulated social housing providers should have policies to deal with antisocial behaviour, should be responsive to tenants' needs, and it will give us another angle if we believe that's not the case with the problems we're seeing in one of our social housing providers.
I think that you focus quite a lot on social housing. I'm also asking you about private developers in the private housing sector, because we are building a lot of estates in which it's not social housing, it's private housing, but we are putting social tenants maybe into that housing, regardless of which, it doesn't matter whether it's social tenants or private renters. The fact is that these buildings are actually the manifestation of antisocial behaviour with the fact of the way that they're designed, the way that they're not maintained, the upkeeping, the breakdown of mechanics, whatever it is that's going on in these buildings. These management companies are not looking after them, and so that's just for you to look at. That same model should be applied to, for me, should be applied to private housing. My other question to you was around signage, because I have just recently had 2 emails coming to me where basically the council does not have signage and they're not going to order more signage, and that is, I'm gobsmacked at that. One is about children playing in car parks in developments where you've got houses being built and you've got a car park, and there's lots of kids playing around, kicking balls around in car parks. Whilst they may not have damaged a car, or may not have been hurt or been run over by a car yet, we cannot. It upsets me and bothers me that we would only act when something has happened to a child, rather than go, no ball games being put up as a signage in an area where there's cars parked, and quite a lot of cars parked. So, and then the other thing is about street drinking as well. We've created all these areas on our high streets where people can come and sit down in benches. But as I've explained beforehand in these meetings, that what is appropriate for one area in having those seatings, the demographics of another area, that seating may not be working. And having no street drinking signs up in various parts of the high street to move people on, because the police that come, and the police are asking for this, that come into those areas, can't move people on, because one of the things that they're being told is, well, there's no signage up.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be more than happy to look at those examples. I'm not sure why we might have said no more signs. It's not something I've become aware of. Signs only potentially have limited effect, but if we have got that kind of problem known, children playing football in car parks, which presents a risk, then we ought to be looking at that. I totally agree. In terms of street drinking, again, we've mounted a number of operations each year where, I call them operations, but where we know we've got problems with street drinking. There's certain locations that people will congregate. We go with some of the outreach teams, the drug and alcohol outreach teams as well, talk to the individuals concerned, talk to the shops that may be selling them alcohol. But I would agree totally, we should be looking at making sure signs are in that area. If actually the police are saying they can't act because there's no signs, I'm not aware of that, but I'll be very happy to look at it where that's happening.
Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to understand, Richard, a couple of things. You mentioned tower blocks. Especially there are tower blocks in my ward where there has been persistent antisocial behaviour, and I think you have put things in place which only temporarily work. So do you think you'll have a long-term strategy for those places? Because similar sort of things are happening, like sheds broken into, doors broken into, antisocial behaviour on the communal areas, peeing in the lifts and everything. It's constant. It's just constant barrage of the same sort of things despite you putting the measures. So is there a long-term policy coming in place for such places? And second question, if I may, was if I report a fly tip or a waste, and by the time it's picked up, there are a few things that go next to it. So whoever is picking up will pick up what I've reported and what not what is next to it? Will have to be reported again. They'll come back again with another lorry, another person, to pick the second bit up. Why is that? How does that make sense? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'd say that on that second point, it doesn't make sense, and similar to what Nicola was talking about with the if you've got graffiti next to a fly post. My team aren't directly the ones that commission the work to pick up the waste. That will go through Nicola's teams, but that shouldn't happen. I'm sure Nicola, if she was here, would say if you become aware of where that happens, please do tell us. Well, then we'd love to know, because we need to follow that up with the contractors or with the waste teams at the time to say, well, if you picked up that bag, why didn't you pick up that one which was down the road? That clearly shouldn't happen. I think in terms of the tower blocks, what I've become aware of since I've been here is we've had problems for years in some of our tower blocks, and nobody's managed to find a solution. The approach we're taking now is a lot about trying to equip our staff, in particular our caretakers, for example, housing teams that are present in the property, the contractors who might go in for repairs through the estates team, along with the police, with a way of making sure that we pull together as much intelligence as we can, because what we've found in the past is we might be going and clearing things up, or we might just take a picture and send that in and think, well, I've reported it, but actually having a picture that there's obviously been some people taking drugs in the cell doesn't really help us, because without knowing a bit more about, well, when did it occur, how often is it occurring, we can't end up trying to understand how we can actually prevent it. So I'm hopeful that will start to improve our ability to tackle it long term, but we do know with things like some of the tower blocks, we regularly get the door locks broken, so people either just break the door locks or wedge the doors open so they can get in at night. People who shouldn't be there, people are letting them in because they're drug dealers or they're drug suppliers, and they're letting them in order to sort of do things that they shouldn't, but we can't evidence that. Or sheds in particular, we get them regularly broken into. So we have to look at all the different options around strengthening the position, or the security. But ultimately, even with CCTV, even with the best locks we can, we're still getting people regularly getting in. So I'd love to say to you, yes, we'll get a solution to this. I can say to you, my antisocial behaviour and locality team are working hard on it, along with a lot of other parts of the council and other organisations, but I'm not sure what the answer is going to be to some of these yet.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Can I just put on record, look, we've done a lot of talk about fly tipping. There's an officer that I've spoke to, and I bet most of us have, Jessica. She is by far one of the best people in that team, and she needs to be recognised for what she does. She's proactive, and she's brilliant to talk to, and she's very good at her job. I understand there may be others in there, but from my personal experience, that's someone who I've dealt with. Going on to my question, I see that we cover a lot about aggressive begging. What is the ASB's team's strategy for that? Because I have it rife in my ward. I know Haystown is rife, Useley's rife. What is our strategy? I constantly get told by police that they're issuing notices themselves, but what are we doing as a council to stop this?
Yes, aggressive begging again is another difficult area, because we can go and talk to the people, we can issue them notices, we do, the police do. What we tend to find is obviously the people doing it don't tend to pay the fines. They're often of no fixed abode or an address that frankly we can't follow up any enforcement action against them at. And so if we get the same person again, that gives us more chance with the police to take stronger action. But often they move and it's different people. So I think all our strategy has always been that we'll follow up any complaints. We will make sure we try and identify who the person is. We'll work jointly with the police. But we do know that we'll probably find the same locations, because there's good reason why people go to those locations, often like near bank machines and so on. Mm-hmm. Someone else will come back into that same location after a period of time. So I think we have we undertake a lot of work in the area, but we don't necessarily ever get to the point where we can say we've eradicated it, because other people will just come back and do the same.
Is there scope to add it to the PSPO? So we added over the years, we've added learner drivers in car parks, but that's fine. But to me, I think something like aggressive begging is something that we should be able to have on there, that we can initially straight away enforce on.
I think the reason we didn't add it to the PSPO last time was because at the time the government was consulting on a national legislation to ban aggressive begging. So it's a bit sensitive, because there's a sort of line where they didn't want to ban begging, but they did want to ban those aggressive behaviours, the kind of persistence, abusive languages. So they consulted on it, and we were thinking it was going to come in, but of course now we're not sure. So we'll have to wait and see whether we need to revisit a local prohibition.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. One statement and one question, if that's okay. First, a statement actually in defence of your department, because what has been said by Councillor Punja and Councillor Court, I haven't had that experience in my ward at all. Whenever I've asked for signs, they have been put up, and whenever I report fly tipping or junk on the street, it is, if there is stuff nearby, it is also picked up. So I just wanted to say that in defence of the department, there are people doing hard work there, and if the ball signs, if the ball game signs or no street drinking signs are really, really important, there is always ward budget as well. A quick Google search that I've done shows you can pick one up for as cheap as £5.52. So I would recommend that in the first instance, if there really isn't any available. But my question, something I do have a bit of a gripe with, is the response to members' inquiries, and that was mentioned in there. And I just wanted to ask what steps are being taken to improve the response times for service requests and members' inquiries, because there is a chart, and it does say multiple days, and it does seem kind of within the scope, but we all know the reality is you get an email on the last day via GOS and you're told, okay, someone's looking into it, and so actually something that's only meant to be 8 days takes about 20 days, and it does get quite frustrating for us to continually have to wait for these updates. So I was just asking what can be done to improve that, and it might just be my frustration with GOS more than anything else.
No, I think it's absolutely valid. And I mentioned the systems issues earlier, but I think the reality is the volumes are huge when you consider the resources we've got. So if you look at the numbers of cases in a quarter, we get through about 800 actionable cases that ultimately go to probably no more than about 14 people. You can see the challenge, and we have a triage team. I say team, it's 2 people. So all of those 1,200 that come in every quarter go through 2 people to be able to work out are they actionable, who do they need to be allocated to, and make further inquiries if we need further information. We're currently doing a piece of work to kind of assess what we think the capacity we would need overall to be able to manage that caseload when you break down the different types of cases and how long it takes each one to deal with. So we can quantify how long it takes to deal with an average abandoned vehicle case, for example. And that inevitably will point out that we need more capacity to be able to keep up, so that will take us down some options of thinking about whether we actually have to reduce service provision, say we can't do certain things, clear up fly tipping rather than investigate that kind of policy option. But the systems improvements could make a significant difference, because there's a lot of inefficiency in the system that I think we can drive out before we get to that point. So my view is we need to complete the work to assess what the capacity realistically is we need to meet the demands, and that was something we agreed to do when we restructured the teams. We agreed to look again at whether the team structure and capacity was fit for purpose, and then once we've got that evidence base and we've driven out the systems improvements, we can look at actually where does that leave us in terms of our ability to meet what we know are residents' reasonable demands for the environmental issues and ASB to be dealt with, but at the moment sometimes we struggle to do that promptly enough.
I mean, just a suggestion, if possible, maybe that a bit more of that could be explained to us rather than we're investigating. We'll get back to you as soon as we can, because it doesn't help us when we're responding to residents, and it doesn't help you, because then we end up getting frustrated at you, or we go through someone else, or it just doesn't help anyone. So if you just say, look, we're going through this step, get back to you as soon as possible, that would at least give us something to give back to our residents.
Councillor Punja.
Thank you. Just more of a statement, actually. And it was from previously about procurement and the extension of contracts, or whether you were going to look at, people were going to look at new contracts and do procurement in that way. And I just wondered if there was a process of appraisal that happened in any of these before extensions are given to any contracts whatsoever, because whilst maybe some councillors don't have certain experiences, doesn't mean that experiences that we as councillors have are not valid and not relevant to making the system better or making the processes better. And I do believe that there are certain things that actually I don't really want to buy a sign and then have to put up a sign that might collapse on a child, and then I'm responsible for putting up that sign. That's the council's duty to do. So I think that something which is in communal areas for councils, it's, board budgets are there to kind of display things, but and empower communities, but just something like a no ball sign in a car park for children not to play in a car park is a responsibility that the council should be putting up, not me as a councillor being putting up and then being held responsible for it. But I'm just interested in procurement.
Yeah, thank you. I will take that point away about the car parks. If there are car parks and there's ball games going on in them, we should be doing something about that. Yes, the contract extensions, generally it's normally a cabinet member decision around extensions. What we are doing with the contracts, the environmental enforcement contract that is due, will now expire in December 2025, is undertaking a much wider review. Part of what I've just spoke about in terms of capacity, but also what the council might need going forward in terms of that on-street visible role for residents. What's very positive about the current contract is that we recover all the costs of the contract through the income from the fines. So effectively it's cost neutral to the council, and yet we are also dealing with all these environmental issues as the report shows. But there are other options that we could have. We could have people who are much more like community wardens that have less of a focus on identifying breaches and issuing expenditure notices, and more around engaging with people about what will make the biggest difference here, and how do we work together to enable that solution. But that has cost. So we are going through that evaluation at the moment. But the contract extension that's referred to, that was just we reviewed the data with cabinet member about what the contracts provided, and when it was due to expire, and they asked us to look at a review, but to extend for a year to give us a chance to continue with the service while we do that review.
Just on the action days, we've been doing action days now for quite a while because of the hotspots of various areas, and especially around bins, and they are really working really, really well, because we're actually going with council officers and also the contractors as well for that, and specifically around those dwellings that are above shops, and talking to them about where they should put their bins out and how they should do them and what days, because sometimes people don't even realise what days to put their bins out, even though it's highly publicised or whatever. So those action days are working really, really well, and we're getting more and more hotspots. So I think that is showing that actually going out, knocking on the doors, talking to residents and speaking to them, is all business owners, because we've been doing that with a lot of business owners who are putting their rubbish in spaces. So good plan there, and really great to get us as councillors involved in that too, to be working alongside you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say something myself in closing this item, and that's going back to page 36 on the FPNs. This is not the first time this graph has come back to this committee, and it's disappointing that we seem to be seeing the same sort of stats, in that the figures show that 79% of those FPNs are within 3 wards. the last time this came before the committee raised concerns that it was just being targeted at those wards. And looking at it, it's low-hanging fruit. You're just targeting the town centres. There's no effort being made in any of the other wards. You've also missed wards off the sheet. You've missed Charville, you've missed Northwood, you've missed Northwood Hills, and you've missed Yedding. So the figures are really not telling me the full story here. You're also mixing in your own internal figures with the contractors for reasons unknown to me. I think they perhaps make them look a bit more rosier, but what I would like to see is this chart come back again, I think, within a year. And in doing so, I think we need to make a bit more effort in showing those stats more clearly. I think you need to separate the in-house stats from the contractors. If there's 0 cases in the ward, that should be shown, and if there are 0, I personally would like to know how many visits have been made to that ward. We boast many times that this council has record number of green flags, and with green flags come a lot of open spaces and parks, which need a lot of patrols and a lot of, because it comes with antisocial behaviour, it's a natural thing. So just saying that the figures are merely limited to town centres is a fantasy land, really, because it is far beyond town centres. It's in our parks and open spaces and also on our housing estates. So I think a lot more effort needs to be made in those areas. So with that, I would propose to this committee that this report is brought back again within a year, and in doing so we have a lot more in-depth review of this and a breakdown so we can clearly see what is going on at ward level with the director present. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Richard, thank you very much for your attendance this evening. Go on, Councillor Garner, sorry.
Can Richard come back earlier in the meeting, speak earlier in the meeting, because I think a couple of meetings he's had to stay right till the end.
Yes, if it's, I would not say the first one if we've got a major review, but certainly the second I think will be nice to him on that occasion. And but as you can see from this evening, this item takes up a lot of time with questions, so we won't want to hold the other items back too late. Okay, we now move on to the forward plan, pages... Thank you. And our work programme, pages 65 to 68. As I mentioned earlier, the fly posting with fun fairs is something I think we should look at as a committee. We'll have an information item added to the programme. I know Liz is working on that behind the scenes. Liz, did you want to comment at all on the work programme, or are we happy for now? We've got some frontline visits lined up, have we?
I think we're working on a potential frontline visit for September to the recycling centre in Edmonton, essentially, which apparently is very interesting according to Nicola. So that's the current one that we're working on. And obviously, if anybody has any other suggestions for information items that they feel would be important to add to the work programme, then please let me know. Thank you.
If I could also place on record the committee's thanks for the officers to arrange our last frontline visit. We went out with the Ford team, and we've also been out to the call centre and the main reception, all very informative visits, and I'm sure... Sorry, Councillor Smord, did you indicate?
Yeah, I feel like I've harped on about this, but a potential visit to either Uxbridge or Ruislip-Lido. I know they're very different in times, or Lido, as I'm told you should actually call it. I just wondered whether that would be an interesting visit. Councillors can bring their swimming costumes if they so wish. Have a splash on the splash.
We know about the water there. No.
But on a serious note, I think it's an interesting. There's a lot of things going on there, whether it be tackling ASB, some of our green spaces, some of the things that are going on with the Woodland Centre, various. So.
Maybe our enforcement officers would like to join us and we can see them first hand in action.
We could indeed.
Good. Okay, thank you very much everyone for your attendance. The agenda is now complete, so we'll finish now at 9:20. Thank you very much for your attendance. Have a good evening.